the math behind clouds, often with surprising and counterintuitive results. He's the author of Cloudonomics. He's currently head of business development and strategy at Telx, but he has a storied past at companies like AT&T and HP and Bell Labs and so on. And every time I listen to him talk, I realize how little I actually understand about the economics and the metrics that are really driving cloud adoption today. Joe.
Thank you. Oh, clicker, that'll be helpful. Hi, everyone. As was mentioned, I'm Joe Weinman with Telx, which is a national co-location and interconnection company. But what I'm going to talk about today is actually something that I call Cloudonomics. And I actually have two deceptively simple questions, which when I ask them, you're going to be like, okay, you know, maybe I should break for lunch right now. The first question is, why are we doing all this stuff? Like, what's the value of cloud, or more specifically, what's the business value of cloud computing? And the second question is, where do we think it's all headed? What are the trends and why? I guess it's like 2.3 questions, but whatever. So without further ado, let me start off getting into a few basic concepts that we all know and understand. I know some people are new to cloud, so I want to cover those first. First of all, we know the cloud is a revolutionary new approach. The benefits include the CapEx to OpEx translation. Obviously, cost reduction and also business agility has increasingly come to the fore. The third thing is that economies of scale are absolutely essential in Cloudonomics. So providers are building out these large-scale, hyperscale, multi-football field data centers. And that in turn drives unit costs down. And by driving unit costs down, what that implies is, of course, a number of things in terms of both industry structure and IT. But the most important thing is what Nick Carr calls a big switch. And that big switch is out of the enterprise data center and into the cloud. So you can kiss your old data center goodbye. The economies of scale also imply industry consolidation because, let's face it, if two mid-sized companies can reach a unit cost that's here, if they can consolidate, then they'll reach a unit cost that's here. And therefore either be more profitable, build their cash reserves, or gain market share by passing those savings on to customers. The other thing that Nick Carr mentions in a different book is that basically IT has become ubiquitous, therefore a commodity, and therefore the correct strategy is cost optimization, right? If something is non-strategic, you try and cost reduce the expletive deleted out of it for the simple reason that that improves the bottom line. And then the last thing I'll mention is that reduced costs of their very nature imply reduced spend. These are the cloud basics. I think at this point, hopefully you're all pretty familiar with them. If not, hopefully you all gain them. The only problem with them is that they're all wrong. Maybe instead of saying all wrong, I'll just say in the words of the CIA agent in Independence Day, actually, Mr. President, that's not exactly true, if you remember that line. So I'm going to cover a lot of these, but basically I don't think the cloud is that revolutionary. Not that it's bad, I love the cloud, but it's not necessarily revolutionary. It represents traditional existing technologies like virtualization and multi-tenancy, and a business model that has proven itself over the millennia. So pay-per-use on-demand services, you can own a house, you can stay in a hotel room, you can buy a car, you can take a taxi. Even money is something that we can get on a pay-per-use on-demand model. That's called a loan. Therefore, it's not clear the extent actually to which economies of scale are key, or that there will be a big switch, and I'll cover some of the math behind that argument on my last slide. The theory that there will only be 5 computers in the world, first promulgated by Thomas J. Watson, and now claimed to be perhaps Amazon, Microsoft, Google, et cetera, actually doesn't match what we see in any other industry vertical. What we see is, yes, a few big players, but also a long tail of providers that have attacked different portions of the market. For example, you have Walmart, but then you have lots of companies like 7-Eleven that compete on convenience, or Betsy Johnson that competes on fashion, et cetera. So I will question the IT doesn't matter argument in a second. The reduced cost imply reduced spend argument really doesn't make too much sense on 2 levels. One of which is that generally, if costs come down, it means that you can do more. And so what some people call the Jevons paradox, named after Stanley Jevons, that actually consumption can go up as price comes down, is really not that much of a paradox. It's just called price elasticity of demand, and is particularly applicable for something like computing, which is, after all, a general purpose technology. So to cover Nick's book, which by the way is an excellent book, and it's extremely well articulated, it's got great examples, and it's wonderful. What he says is that the ubiquity of IT causes it to be a commodity, makes it non-strategic. And if something is non-strategic, the correct approach is to minimize spend. You don't say, wow, those paper clips are really holding our printed documents together well. I wonder if we bought the gold-plated ones, how cool would that be, right? It's all about cost reduction. So his answer, does IT matter? His answer simply is, nope, it doesn't. Now, the argument is a little bit to me like this analysis that was once done by top aerodynamic engineers that used a set of differential equations and advanced energy consumption analysis to prove that bumblebees can't fly. And it makes perfect sense up until you actually see a bumblebee fly, which calls into question the whole chain of thought. And the digital bumblebee that makes this argument a little bit questionable, or as Karl Popper would say, falsifies that hypothesis, this is the digital bumblebee. Does anyone know who this is? This is Google before it was Google, when it was Larry and Sergey's dorm room project called Backrub. And of course, if you say what made Google successful, and you're trying to claim that it's not IT, you could say, all right, well, is it preferential access to resources? No, they were indexing the World Wide Web. Was it preferential access to capital? No. Was it brand? No, they didn't even have a corporate name. Was it first mover advantage? No, they were search provider number 17. So you have to basically ask yourself how they not only gained dominance and also have maintained their share over the years, even with no shortage of investments. And this is in no way to discount the competition, but the point is that IT is fundamental to their strategy. And I would argue, moreover, that there's lots of other examples. Harrah's with data mining, American Airlines originally with Sabre, Inditex, which you know is Zara, with their fast fashion enabled by IT. And in fact, what we see is, this shows the chart of Encyclopedia Britannica versus Wikipedia, and this is log scale, so you're seeing an exponential decrease versus an exponential increase for the disruptive business model. Of course, it's not just encyclopedias. There are lots of other companies and lots of other segments that are being completely, as Mary Meeker would say, reimagined, or as Schumpeter would say, being destroyed, while other things are being created, namely leveraging digital business models. So yes, there are tactical IT systems like room reservation systems and expense reporting systems, but they go increasingly in importance to strategic systems as well as the existential import of IT systems. And what I'm thinking of there is not Jean-Paul Sartre, but rather think about Borders Books. Borders Books is no longer with us because they failed to formulate an effective strategic response to Amazon.com. So how could IT not matter? So in Cloudonomics, basically, and I'm covering just a few sections of one of the chapters, but that's pretty clear, and this is maybe obvious, except that people tend to argue with what's obvious. They say, it doesn't matter, when of course we live in an increasingly digital world, and therefore IT and cloud is an imperative. It's strategic and existential, and rather than minimizing spend, what you should be doing is focusing investments on those areas of the business that matter. I mean, I don't know what could be simpler than this, and yet there are people that want to argue that it doesn't matter. This is a very simple, straightforward conclusion. So next time someone tries to cut your IT budget, you can download these slides from Cloud Connect and hopefully prove your point. Now, that's a qualitative argument. There's also a quantitative argument, namely that if you look at the use of big data for decision making, Eric Brynjolfsson at MIT and his colleagues did a fairly rigorous study showing a direct correlation with usual financial metrics. Sunil Mithas at the University of Maryland did a great study, lots of firms, statistically valid analysis out the kazoo using these incredibly bizarre statistical validation, confidence interval, Tobin's Q analysis, et cetera, techniques. And what they showed is that a dollar invested in IT generates a return of $2. That's accounting for time lag for the investment to pay off, et cetera. Two things that are subtle about that are that investment is better than either advertising or R&D, if you look at the numbers up there. What's not shown is that IT investments almost always resulted in higher revenue as opposed to cost reduction. So we should be thinking about revenue growth, not cost reduction. And for that, what I like to use is a model called the value disciplines model, which is from Tracy and Wiersma. They argue that basically a company can achieve strategic competitive advantage either through better processes or by better products and services or by better customer relationships. And to that, I add a fourth, which is accelerated innovation, which is kind of the meta strategy that drives all three of these. So what does that mean in a cloud, big data, and mobility context? First of all, the point that I would make is that if you think about a field service delivery firm that is trying to optimize fuel consumption and also labor productivity, being able to do things like control routes using real-time data and processing in the, whether it's private or public cloud, doesn't really matter. I'm talking about geographically dispersed, networked digital business models very broadly. Obviously, that can do things like improve customer service, reduce payouts due to SLA violations, like packages not delivered on time, as well as decrease customer churn, increase total customer lifetime value, and perhaps most importantly, achieve strategic competitive advantage. In terms of product leadership, a good example is something like a tablet, which certainly is great for frying eggs if it were just a disconnected device. But when you connect it up with the cloud, you end up with something truly amazing, which is this whole product service system. And obviously, being able to download applications, being able to have these integrated hybrid services like Siri or natural language translation or web search or whatever, it's the endpoint and the network and the cloud altogether that enable those products to be successful. And just building another tablet doesn't matter. You need to build a whole ecosystem and all the cloud services behind it. I think that should be clear. It's not just tablets, though. Think about cars, like something with OnStar, or think even about a sneaker brand or athletic clothing brand that has managed to differentiate itself. For example, Nike Plus, where I can upload my races, paces, and so forth, and integrate that in with social network functionality. Customer intimacy, I think about Amazon.com, Netflix, Pandora, all the work around recommendation engines that in turn builds tighter customer relationships, again, increasing customer lifetime value and revenues. And then obviously that is certainly the case, those of you that saw the Target story. But the last good example, I think, is accelerated innovation, where being able to crowdsource and leverage idea markets has proven its payoff. And you've got things like the Netflix Prize, where they were able to improve their recommendation algorithm, Cinematch, by leveraging a cloud-based contest. Goldcorp, which even 10 years ago opened up their data to all. And you could add to that things like Innocentive or Edison Nation that basically provide a market via the cloud that enables challenges to be matched with solvers. Organization designs are shifting. If you look at complexity versus pace of change, you've got simple organizations like fruit stands, traditional hierarchies like the government. Then you have entrepreneurial organizations, but increasingly the network organization. And if you add all that in, we're actually moving to the networked organization. And beyond the networked organization, we have the dynamically networked organization, namely Li and Feng, which every week creates a different configuration of its suppliers of fabric, thread, buttons, and so forth. And so that degree of dynamism in turn implies a flexible, dynamic, intercloud type of IT infrastructure rather than a traditional monolithic one. In terms of product lifecycle, it's better to be faster, and that helps you capture value in the market. And of course, platform services and infrastructure as a service help with time to market and time to volume. Lastly, I want to close with a couple of thoughts. This is the NIST definition of cloud. It's obviously pretty long. I've got a shorter definition, pooled resources with location independence, accessible over a network with linear pricing on demand. As Alistair mentioned, there's some math behind all of these. And I'll just briefly say, since I'm out of time, that there are some interesting implications of these fundamental equations. First of all, a private cloud that can multiplex 2 workloads can achieve a 30% reduction in penalty cost. 4 workloads can be 50%. Even a mid-sized provider can get within 10% of a theoretical optimum. In addition to that, under the utility, there's that algorithm that basically proves that hybrids are optimal, which I've been arguing for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years since I did the math on that. So with that, I'm out of time. I'll just say that if you want to come by booth 422, I'll be there for the next couple of hours, and we can continue the discussion. Otherwise, thank you for your time, and hope you enjoy lunch.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Well, folks, this concludes our program today. The expo floor is now open.
Thanks a lot for coming.